Hi, everybody. This is Yasser Rizwan here with another episode of BetterTech. Today we have with us Mr. Karl Matson. So, Karl, why don't you just start with your introduction and introducing your organization as well, and what kind of work do you do?
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Karl Matson. I'm the CISO for Noname Security. We're an API security company, and we focus on the API, which is really the next generation of modern applications, and that's where we focus our security technologies. And so, by background, I spent about a decade in financial services, another decade in the U.S. government, and I've been with Noname about 2 years, and this is my first opportunity to work as part of a technology company.
So, API security is interesting. So typically, when the modern architectures they heavily use APIs, and those APIs are typically REST APIs or SOAP APIs, and these days probably all of those are REST APIs typically. So how do you So I remember working on security, and there used to be some SAML thing, and then there were other hardware kind of security where you can put a box, and then you pass your API calls through that, and that box can scan the security. So what kind of security or API security do you handle?
Yeah, so the first thing, API is a broad term because REST APIs are sort of the dominant part of the API landscape. But they're also like gRPC is now a protocol that's becoming more and more useful for developers. So what we see with APIs and securing APIs that the previous historical use of APIs oftentimes was either as a utility, service to service communications, or there was a couple of APIs that were public facing, and we would run those through API gateways, web application firewalls, and those can be very effective controls. But when developers now have in their hands the ability to use APIs for like a broad number of purposes, from low code, no code app development to continuously publishing and changing APIs on the fly. What we find is that the control points that we rely on for APIs historically kind of fail at scale, and they fail oftentimes not because of like poor developer design, but maybe, for example, we don't have the right network controls protecting the API. So what we do as a company is we look at the API ecosystem as a fabric across all gateways, all network zones, all development environments and code repos, so that we can look and evaluate first, where are our APIs? Are they healthy? What's their posture? And then the information that we derive, that analysis, then goes to make better use of the gateway. So APIs, for example, that should be brokered by a gateway or should be sitting behind a WAF. We need to have that lane of that level of visibility across the board in order for us then to use the technologies like a gateway exactly how they're designed to do, and they work fantastically well when they're used and configured as designed.
Right. So what kind of architectural impacts this strategy would have, like on performance, on cost, and on maintainability? How do you address that?
Sure. So there's a couple of considerations architecturally. So the first is API traffic can be voluminous, and so it becomes unreasonable to analyze traffic if you have to offload it to a remote destination, a multi-tenant SaaS somewhere else. That can be an enormous amount of cost. So what we first focus on is where do we analyze API traffic, and we analyze it locally. We want to have the engine of discovery and of analysis to be located as close to, in the server rack right next to your server. That's where we want to have that API analyzed. We don't want to offload traffic. Multi-cloud trafficking costs can be exorbitant. So we want to analyze it locally. The second thing is we don't want to sit in line. So because we want to have an organization make use of its gateways and its WAFs and its network choke points as designed. So what we do is we sort of sit as either a passive network tap or a read-only traffic source, so that we can read traffic and we can inform the network nodes and inform the gateway of events or misconfigurations or vulnerabilities we find. But we want to take ourselves out of line so that we don't cause sort of unintended traffic impact. That's a really important feature because most organizations of scale have those network nodes in place, and nobody wants to go through the pain of putting another platform in line to my customer traffic, and so we don't do that.
Right. And what about its impact on cost and maintenance, and how difficult it is to implement, and what kind of skill set does it require to have that kind of security?
Well, for public cloud environments, the impact is really minimal because we basically stand up a workload that inside the customer's account. So you're paying a very minor compute cost. When we're looking at API traffic, we're receiving a copy of that traffic for analysis purposes. We analyze the schema, analyze the payload, and then we drop the traffic so that we're not storing anything. And so that in cloud account, the friction and cost overhead is minimal because you're only paying for a very minor amount of compute cost in your cloud account. For a legacy on-prem environment, it's just usually a couple of containers that run on a Linux box. Think of it as a hardened appliance that can run in a data center or run in a securities or a network zone, and that sort of server, eight core Linux box is pretty standard because we're not storing a lot of data. We don't need like a data lake on the back end where it requires a lot of construction and storage costs. So that's important for us to sort of minimize the cost and do the analysis locally, save the minimal amount of data possible around the API calls, so that the cost footprint is as low as it can be.
And my last question was around the complexity of it and what kind of skill set do you need to maintain this or implement this kind of security?
Yeah, so there's really two software products that we have as a company. The first is, as I mentioned, our software running in an infrastructure. So that might be a cloud account or a legacy environment. Usually, the installation or implementation would happen by a network operations team or a security architecture engineering team who implements the technology, and then the applications and the application security teams usually are the end users because they're the ones who are looking for the insight. Like the results of the technology use is usually by an application professional. Now, the second software piece that we do have is a testing engine, and that testing engine is a lightweight testing engine that usually developers are sort of self-servicing because they can test API documentation during their development practice. And that's not really an infrastructure build at all. That's just follow the bouncy ball, install software, and test APIs. More of an individual workbench, less so an enterprise technology.
So this is kind of very specific domain like API security, but your experience is a lot bigger, a lot wider. So how do you think, because the world is becoming more and more complex, how do you see security catching up with everything else, and how do you see the future?
Well, I think for me coming from a financial services background, the origin story of a security professional caring about APIs a lot is essentially 5, 6, 7 years ago. The theme emerged of transitioning to real-time payments, and that was the old school version of that was every day at midnight, the mainframe would send out a batch transaction that was all the ACH deposits for the day. And that's the timeline expectation of banking was 2, 3 days for money movement. The timeline expectation has changed dramatically. Now we expect, Zelle and Cash App and Venmo, we expect Apple Pay to be near real time. And those are all API based money movement services. And so for me, my attention on APIs was driven by sort of business demand for consumer happiness. Consumers want more real-time payments movement. I think that you can take that concept and you can extrapolate it now to every industry vertical. So an example would be healthcare. In a healthcare environment, do patients and consumers expect more from their app, their mobile app? Do they expect more services and more information, real-time availability of billing and accounts receivable and things like that? Manufacturing. Do manufacturing firms have a higher expectation for real-time inventory monitoring, real-time accounts receivable, accounts payable, tracking vehicles on a road? So I think in every industry vertical, the theme is that modernizing and transforming our applications to meet higher expectations for availability of systems and data to be near real time only accelerates the API as the kind of asset that is sort of destined to keep growing in its use. I mean, I think like the cynical question is like if we all have our iPhones, do any of us think that a consumer will want their iPhone to do less 5 years from now? No. We will expect our mobile apps and our phones to do that much more for us, for payments, for healthcare, for entertainment, and consumer expectations for a better experience are not going away. Threat actors take notice. There's the whole threat side of this, and don't get me wrong. But I think it starts with business and consumer demand for just better transformative technology.
And with that much of experience with the industry, where do you see the security awareness is going, and how can we improve it? Because with new AI technologies like generative technologies,
Yep.
there's a lot more chance that these technologies can even leak your confidential data, or they can breach your information security. So what do you see is the future of information security in the presence of these new fancy technologies?
Qualitatively, this feels a lot like, if I say we're at the beginning of an AI transformation of technology, it feels to me a lot like we were at 8 years ago as we were thinking about the transformation of cloud, which is that there are remarkable improvements we could actually make by going from legacy to cloud if we do it right. But if we do things wrong, things go wrong really fast. And so what it really does is it almost like shines a spotlight on an organization and its security practices for whether you capitalize on this transformation. The answer is absolutely yes, but if you do it wrong, you fail fast. You fail really fast and you fail really hard. And so I think AI is another generation of that, which is the degree to which we can capitalize on AI let's say developer productivity. Let's just use that as a simple example of AI that's really present right now. Can we use that to develop better, more secure software? 100% yes. That's absolutely true that intelligent use of automation and co-piloting can make a developer develop better source code faster if done well, and also if done poorly accelerates the leakage of data and IP at a rate that security teams could scarcely catch up with, let alone even maybe even know that's happening. So it is an interesting sort of juncture in time. But I think what we found with cloud was um, good governance, and just a little bit of governance and some good security planning um, can lead us to a remarkable improvement in security posture. And so I think we have that opportunity here with AI. We can really capitalize on some secure advancements of AI if we just um, give it a couple of good whiteboard sessions and some technical controls. We can do some really great things with AI.
And have you have you yourself used AI to improve security, or do you have plans?
So far, well, our security team, which includes IT in our organization, IT and security are one team. What we focused on is capitalizing on opportunities to make human experiences better and faster. So, for example, knowledge management on our own documentation and our own service tickets, so that our people can access the organizational knowledge that we already possess, that we can capitalize on that. And the same goes with our customers. Can we give customers access to the chatbot functionality? That's a remarkable step forward. That they don't have to pick up the phone and wait for an engineer to call you back. You can just answer the chatbot, and there's actually a substantial improvement there, just in customer satisfaction, in employee satisfaction. Another good example would be like production support. So, can we apply, for example, like interactive just-in-time provisioning and deprovisioning of things like service accounts and credentials that are key? That's a huge lift because people love the ability to serve self-service just-in-time access. Security teams love it because it allows us to remove all access that's not needed right now. There is no maintenance of persistent access to the organization. That's a huge lift. So we're looking for those really easy wins as a security department to basically take out the daily operational friction of just my work environment. Over on the product side, they're thinking about much more sophisticated like correlation logic, behavioral detections that can capitalize on new models availability, and that's still a work in progress for us. That's a bigger problem set to solve. So the security team, we're just trying to make everybody's life incrementally easier each week with sort of the use of automation.
So are there any new, for example, we are familiar with ISO 27001
Yep.
and SOC 2 kind of compliances, one and two, or those. Are there any new certifications on the horizon to handle these new kinds of things or new kinds of scenarios, or this should be sufficient for foreseeable future?
It's a great question. I think the answer is still outstanding there. I don't think that there is a common body of practice yet for internal auditors, for external auditors, for regulators to be evaluating the responsible and secure use of AI. We aspire to be ahead of that by attempting to apply the disciplines of third-party risk, application security, data protection to the new paradigm. But to the extent that is or isn't satisfying external parties, that's a great question. I think that we all have we all need to be contributing back to the dialogue, so that our auditors and so our examiners and certainly our customers can calibrate their expectations and set standards in a way that I know where I'm meeting expectations, and so I know where I can improve.
So any suggestions for the emerging industries? How should they take security? I mean, typically what we have seen in smaller industries, security is typically an afterthought rather
Yep.
than investing upfront. So what are your suggestions for anybody who are just part of emerging industries?
Well, I think for any organization, but particularly smaller companies or emerging markets, the best tool at our disposal is to what I would call deputize good developers and with training and with authorities to sort of act as a security champion, act as a security agent as we build and deploy any IT systems. The best answer always is that we've built or deployed software and built and deployed systems that were designed securely and built securely the first time. Our system administrators, our developers, our network technicians, the more self-equipped they are to implement security practices, then the less expectation we need that the security team needs to go back and fix something or bolt on a new technology. And so I think every organization has the opportunity to uplift the security wherewithal of their IT staff and their developer staff. And that's always where I would want to start first, is by empowering that group of individuals rather than the security team needing an infinitely increasing budget to keep up.
Thank you so much, Carl, for being with us. It was just really nice meeting you over here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.